The information lifecycle is an important concept to talk about because information is managed and understood at different stages or different phases. So we must be able to understand this process as a whole to better able to apply information management principles and deal with information. In one very simple diagram here, actually from the same Floridi text as before, is this one information life cycle here, where we have the idea of creating and generating information first. Information is created, and then it is collected by maybe the same or other entities. It is recorded and stored. It can be processed. Of course, process will probably kind of apply everywhere. There's some kind of process. So, you know, this is an abstraction. But maybe there will be a main process after the data is recorded, and then after it's processed, it can be distributed, transmitted, or further analyzed. Once it is transmitted or distributed, published, released, opened. It can also be consumed by people. It can be developed, further interpreted. More information can be derived from it, and of course, it can also be recycled, erased, and so on, and leading to the cycle again. There is this other more developed view of the information life cycle from a very interesting article, more from the enterprise systems management perspective. I recommend you to take a look at it. iScoop information management is where I got this image, and you can see here on the capture side the different ways to capture human created information via forms that people fill out, via microfilm, via office documents that need to be scanned, via events, sensors that capture events in the environment. Or maybe from here, application created, see application created versus human created. There are technologies to process this capture. There is classification and indexing needed to organize the information and make sure the information can actually be retrieved when you need to retrieve it. After this, there are several types of management processes. So document management is a little bit different than web content management. Web content management is a kind of document management. Document management is broader. Web content management, it's often its own sort of sphere of action because web content has its own structure, its own particularity, so it needs its own sort of management. There's also records management, which is more related to database management. There's digital asset management, which has its own also distinctions from records and web content management. All of this goes within a workflow of business practice management. Business processes management, BPM workflow, business processes management. There's often a preservation of material for long term that needs to be considered. Also the storage after the capture and the collection and the classification. So working with data warehouses, databases, version control, searching the information, content management systems. This is all relevant technologies and processes in the information lifecycle. After that, often the information needs to be delivered somewhere via some presentation in some user interface or via publication of documents or reports. These can take different formats, may use different technologies. Perhaps security technologies need to be implemented to ensure that items are not illegally copied and distributed. And there are various distribution channels as well for the information, maybe directly to your client, open to the public, various ways to go about this. And of course, in this course, we will actually address all sorts of areas within the information lifecycle. However, lastly, I wanted to bring here one analytical distinction when we talk about the information lifecycle. And that follows from the different definitions of data and information from before. And that is the difference between the information life cycle versus the data life cycle. So the information life cycle, actually, we can see it more as over here in the semiotic triangle. It's more related to the meaning itself, the thought. So that has to do with the idea generation, the carrying out of experiments, the analysis, the tests, experimental tests that are done, the discussions surrounding the hypotheses, the peer review and discussions or peer reviews of publications, the surveys, the interviews of authors, and so on. That's the life cycle of the meaning of the ideas. Now, there is the data life cycle, which is the life cycle of the record, and that's more associated with the symbol or the sign. So the procuring of hardware, the creating of records, the managing the database, the sharing the data records, deleting records, opening, closing records. So the data life cycle is more related to the record itself. And I give you two sets of examples here, which I hope will clarify this. So in the information life cycle, when we're talking about creating the information, we may see, for example, the researcher proposes a hypothesis that electromagnetic radiation from cell phones can cause cancer. So that's an idea, of course, has a referent, has an object in the world that it refers to. Then this researcher may go in the collecting stage, collect information about electromagnetic radiation impacts on cancer on rats. Maybe this has to be through experiments. Researcher stores information in a database that he obtained. The information about these impacts are analyzed by the researcher and maybe the computer. The findings are shared with other researchers via journal publications surrounding the idea of the electromagnetic radiation impact from cell phones on cancer. Then there's the consumption. So these are results and arguments are used by other researchers to refute or praise the work. And then there's the recycling, such as other studies are done and hypothesis is confirmed, negated, reinterpreted, or expanded. So this is the life cycle of the idea itself. And I wanted to distinguish that from the life cycle of the record. So the life cycle of the record, the researcher generates data records, begins with the data records on the study of ER impacts on cancer on rats. And then the records the data are collected and organized into maybe a central database and location. The data records are stored in the same or other databases. Data about the study's process and analyzed. Notice it has nothing to do with the hypothesis of whether or not electromagnetic radiation from cell phones actually causes cancer. It has nothing to do. It's about the data record itself. The data about the study's process and analyzed. Data is provided for others to download and analyze as well. Other amateur researchers download the data for their own use. Librarians and data managers fix issues with the data or the metadata, and so on. Now, of course, this can get a little bit complicated because when we're talking about it, I gave you a information-based definition of data. So data already contains information. But the point is that in terms of the life cycle, we're often either concerned about the records themselves and whether the records are well kept and well managed. And sometimes we're concerned about the information in the sense of the interpretation and the meaning itself and the truth value of the hypothesis. So those are the two views of data and information and how they may play out in the information life cycle. In the set of lectures, we examine general and special views of data, general and special views of information. We talked about the semiotic triangle of meaning, and we delved a little bit into the information life cycle. We'll see you next time.